Showcasing his computer skills, 87-year-old retired journalist Anthony Sibambo, affectionately known as Babe Sibambo, says he learned how to use a computer at the SABC, where they used to handwrite stories and eventually ended up using computers. Sibambo retired in 2001 after 19 and a half years. He says the SABC has seen a significant change over the years.
When I joined the SABC in 1982, we used to compile our news by hand and then hand those things, those news items to a typist who would type them and then send them by telegraph or by telegram to Pretoria, depending on if it is an item I must repeat, yeah. If it is a regional news story, we would send it to Pretoria. But if it was a national story, then we would send it to Johannesburg. At first, we wrote by hand, but things changed a little bit when a new regional manager came in the person of Mr. Joseph Otto. He found us writing the stories using our hands. Then he said, no, we have got to use some typewriters. And then he ordered some typewriters, and then we switched on from handwriting and to typing. Later on, before I left the SABC, we had computers and so on. So we used to use computers to write stories and so on.
Jonathan Lungu started as a young journalist and moved up the ranks within the public broadcaster. Lungu has done it all at the SABC, from reporting the news in Mozambique and Eswatini to presenting news and current affairs shows. He left the SABC when he was a provincial news editor. Lungu has praised the SABC for being a public mouthpiece and giving young journalists opportunities.
25 years of service at the SABC was an opportunity for me as a young journalist coming to the SABC in 1995. And since then, up until I left the SABC, there's a lot that happened in terms of news gathering. The SABC, when it was established in 1936, you remember that it was a government mouthpiece. And then from there, it changed to be a public broadcaster. Being a public broadcaster, SABC managed to gather news, tell people stories. And that was the part that I liked so much, telling people stories. It was never easy to go out and gather news at that time because, resources, they were a challenge. And through tools of trade also were a challenge. You travel long kilometers, you go to Piet Retief, travel to Piet Retief, come back and package. And that was time consuming. But as time goes on, the SABC managed to introduce some of the technological advanced tools which made work easy for our journalists as well as myself as a journalist.
Stanford Nhlanhla, who was a Siswati newsreader from 1988 to 2021, is affectionately known to Lekwalakwala FM listeners as Malume Stan. He says the work of the SABC has grown beautifully over the years.
Ngathi sibonga kakhulu ukuthi SABC ihambe yatofika la.
I am grateful the SABC has reached this milestone. It was very difficult when I joined the SABC. It was still Radio Swazi, a very small station with little listenership, and they were correct because most of our listeners were here in the Nhlanhla district. But we pushed until we had listeners in Gauteng, Limpopo and KZN. When I left the station, Lekwalakwala FM had listeners all over the country. In my other show, I got correspondence from Zimbabwe and Vilankulu in Mozambique. I couldn't reach Northern Cape and Western Cape. I pass my gratitude to those who are left at the SABC for the wonderful job you are doing. I wish the years can be doubled to 150. SABC has done a lot of work.
KZN ilimpompo sabana balaleli.
A former journalist of the SABC, Freddy Ngobe, says during his time, journalists were passionate about storytelling.
I got to the SABC in the early 20s. I worked for 5 years. I think it was between the year 2000 and 2004, just before the elections. We worked quite very well at the SABC. What I think the SABC then was probably most powerful about was that it was during the time of by media. That is where you send to a story and do both TV and radio, and which meant you have to perfect both disciplines. And again, you were not seeing a situation where journalists will like you're seeing now, where journalists seem to be probably pushing a narrative for a particular party or for a particular individual and so on. Their editorial was still a serious thing, and you would get to present what you want to present. And what drove us then with the crew at that time was to know that when you go there and with your various media houses, you break your stories, you crack it, and you want to present what is fresh.
Meanwhile, the upholders of the Siswati language in Mpumalanga say the SABC through Likwala Kwala FM continues to play a role in ensuring the language is preserved.
So far, we are acknowledging the development and preservation of the language through the broadcasting Likwala Kwala. We have seen significant programs that seek to address serious needs and challenges that are faced by a language, because if you are not using a language, it perishes. So as Siswati, we are representing it in all spheres to make sure that all the preservation and development are kept, so that even when you check in the future, we'll still have more document that represent the language.
In May 1950, the SABC launched its first news service on Springbok Radio, a platform that went on to tell many stories years later. Nhlanhla Jele, SABC News, Mbombela, Mpumalanga.